What's up, Star Wars nerds, and welcome to another episode of Brett on Fett. On today's episode, we'll be talking about Hasbro's upcoming Return to Tatooine campaign and what I'd like to see from it. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 98 of Brett on Fett, and ever since Hasbro did their official reveal of the next haslab, that being the cantina, they have also announced that it is the beginning of a campaign for 2025 that they are calling Return to Tatooine. And they've said that they want the product line to tell a story. And this is the first chapter, a new chapter, if you will, in this strategy where they're going to be apparently releasing several products that work together and help build worlds for the Vintage Collection line, which makes sense. It is the world building scale after all. And the Cantina HasLab is well underway. At the time I'm recording this video, it's closing in on 6,000 backers, needing 8,000 to back. I'm very confident it will reach the minimum of 8,000, although I am a little concerned about it being able to reach all of the tiers at 17,000. So we'll see what happens in the coming weeks with that. And for today's video, I really want to focus on what else we need besides the cantina to help build that world of Tatooine. So I want to try to predict what Hasbro may reveal, but also what I personally would like to see them reveal for Tatooine. But before we get to that, I do have a special pickup to share that just arrived as I started recording this video. So let's take a look. Okay, so right as I was recording today's Return to Tatooine themed video, I had a package arrive at my doorstep. And it was Her Royal Highness herself, Princess Leia Organa. So excited to finally get this definitive main hero from A New Hope. Check out the Hildebrandt logo at the top. They've moved the warning down to the bottom. I love that. And this is just such a classic card back for Leia. Great to see, and the figure looks fantastic. Look at that face sculpt. This will not be a full review, guys, because I don't have my opener version yet. I ordered another one of her from Amazon, but this one is from Big Bad Toy Store. And it's in great shape, so I will not be opening this one. I just want to give you my initial thoughts. And there's a look at the back with her hood up. I love that look for this figure. I think I will probably display her mostly with the hood up. But I wanted to bring in that original trilogy version. This is the last time we got a non-5 POA version of A New Hope Leia. And I just wanted to compare them really quick, starting with the card back on this original trilogy version. I like how the green pops from the display, but they just went way overboard with the tint and it kind of just spilled over onto Leia herself. Whereas this one is much more muted. It doesn't pop as much, but it looks more natural. And then check out the figure comparison. There is no comparison. This original trilogy version just looks silly compared to the new TVC. I mean, that original trilogy version looks like some kind of plastic China doll versus the new Leia looks almost like a Hot Toys Leia shrunk down to 3 3/4. Just very impressive looking so far. And since we've got both of these out, we might as well take a look to compare the backs of the cards. You can see they're very similar since TVC recently went back to that old style. Although I do prefer how the old ones had the original figure release on the back rather than just the same figure on the back. I've said this before. I'll probably keep saying it. It's something I think they should go back to doing. Anyways, let's get that OTC Leia out of here. We finally have a definitive Princess Leia Organa from A New Hope in TVC. It's about time, and I think it's been worth the wait because she looks fantastic. All right, so like I said before, I want to talk about Hasbro's planned Return to Tatooine campaign and what I would like to see them release for that campaign. And to do that, for some talking points, I'm going to bring out some loose figures I have from various Tatooine scenes. Now, like I said before, I'm not going to be getting into the Cantina aliens. We've already covered that in previous videos. But instead, we're going to be looking at what I'd like to see Hasbro produce so that we can build out around the Cantina and beyond all over the planet not just covering A New Hope, but also maybe touching a little bit on some of the other films where Tatooine is prominently used. And so we'll start the discussion with figures for Tatooine we need from A New Hope, because I do think this campaign will primarily focus on A New Hope, but I think they will touch on other films surrounding Tatooine as well. And I'll kick things off by mentioning that arguably the 4 most important characters from A New Hope prominently featured on Tatooine have already been pipelined by Hasbro from that same HasLab reveal livestream, that being Luke Skywalker, Farm Boy Luke, Old Ben Kenobi, Han Solo, and Chewbacca. Very excited to get these characters in figure form, namely Luke, Ben, and Han. Of course, we've already had A New Hope Chewie, and he's just going to get an update basically. But again, as far as main characters from the film featured on Tatooine, it doesn't get much more important than these 4, so glad to see Hasbro's already pipeline revealed these for that campaign. Okay, when Hasbro announced the Return to Tatooine campaign was coming, one of the first things that came to my mind was Sandtroopers. We definitely need some all-new Sandtroopers, and what you're seeing here is the Legacy Collection Sandtrooper that came with that Dewback in the background. And, you know, it's a pretty good figure. I like his backpack, and he looks okay enough, but he's just outdated compared to the new Stormtrooper we have. Now, he does have ball hinge hips there, and that was basically, I think, so he can get his legs around the top of that Dewback. But maybe the main issue I had with this Sandtrooper is that he's too clean. I like my Sandtroopers to be dirty. Sandtroopers
are dirty.
And they basically repacked him on VC14. This was the first Sandtrooper release for TVC. It's the same figure, I think, with just some paint updates. But they didn't make him dirty again. He's still clean, and that just always bothered me. And I think it probably bothered a lot of people because then Hasbro released a new Sandtrooper for TVC, and they went to town on the weathering. This guy is dirtied up. I like this one much better. They might have gone actually a little overboard with the weathering on him, but I think he looks good enough, and it's a great card back. This is VC112, a very good looking Sandtrooper for the time, but again, he's just too outdated at this point. So we've got that all new mold, and speaking of that new mold, here is the new Stormtrooper. This is the Heavy Assault Trooper from Jedi Fallen Order. I've just replaced his rifle with the Heavy Assault Rifle from the Legacy Sandtrooper. And so they could just use this guy and just weather him up, give him the backpack, and it would all be good. So specifically what I think Hasbro should do is give us an Army Builder 4-pack of Sandtroopers. It makes total sense. We've already got the 2 card back versions from TVC. I don't think we need another Sandtrooper on card. This is coming from a carded collector. But I think the Army Builder makes perfect sense. We can get those to have in various scenes from the film, including the Cantina. And so I really want to see an Army Builder 4-pack of an all-new Sandtrooper. I think it just makes so much sense. It would be so easy for Hasbro to do. I would mix up the rankings, maybe have one with the orange pauldron, one with the black, and maybe 2 with the white, or, you know, however they want to do it, as long as they mix it up. And with this video, I'm not putting things in any kind of order of importance. However, I would say a Sandtrooper 4-pack is probably at the top of my list of wants for this Return to Tatooine campaign. And speaking of Sandtroopers, we definitely need an all-new Dewback, especially with the Cantina coming. We need a Dewback to park outside, and what you're looking at is the Legacy Collection Dewback, which is really well made. However, it just does not look accurate to the film. This Dewback is way too skinny. He just looks like some kind of dinosaur, really. The Dewbacks in the film are much huskier looking and not quite as long. So it was a real shame that they went through the trouble of putting this out, but just got the look of it completely wrong. Many fans have been asking for more beasts in TVC, and we're getting that all new blurg, which I'm very excited for. So I think a Dewback would be a perfect second beast to introduce to the line in this Return to Tatooine campaign. All right, next I want to talk about the droid sales scene, because I just think it's a very iconic scene in Star Wars. It's where Luke meets C-3PO and R2-D2 for the first time, and I just love droids, so I can't talk about Tatooine figures without mentioning these guys. I'll just run through them real quick. First up, we've got the security droid. This is from the 2009 Red Legacy Collection. He came with a Jawa, and that one's a little bit hard to find. Next up is R1G4. He is from the 2003 Saga line, and it's a great looking figure, but he's not articulated at all except for his little arms there. But again, still very cool looking droid to have in your background. Next up, of course, is C-3PO. This is that Saga Collection Indoor Ewok Throne 3PO. Still my favorite 3PO C-3PO until Hasbro gives us a much needed vintage collection update for C-3PO. Next up is the WED Treadwell droid. This is from the 2008 Blue Legacy Collection line. He also came with a Jawa, and he's very articulated. This is a very iconic droid from that scene. I thought he really stood out in that scene. And ever since I was a kid, I was always wondering what are all the tasks that he could do. Next up, of course, is R2-D2. This one is from the Vintage Original Trilogy collection, and I just had him handy. Definitely not the best R2-D2, but I do like the nostalgia of his chrome dome. Next, of course, is R5-D4, who was recently repacked from The Mandalorian Season 3, where they really should have weathered him up for that one, by the way. And last but not least, the Lin droid, or Lin droid. It's another Treadwell type droid with a dome. That droid does come off, by the way. He's got a little articulated arm. He came in the 30th anniversary line with a Jawa as well. Now, I brought these droids out just to note how important of a scene this is as far as Tatooine goes in A New Hope. And I don't really think Hasbro will do anything with this. I don't see them re-releasing any of these droids other than maybe R2-D2. I have to admit, I wouldn't mind another repaint of R2-D2 for the Tatooine desert where he's weathered up. You know, something that is a vast improvement for that other R2 we got, where they just really overdid the weathering to where he almost looked like a Dagobah R2. I'd like to see a new one where they just do a better job making him very screen accurate to the way he looked at the sale of the droid scene. But that would be pretty far down on my list of priorities and would probably receive a lot of criticism from fans. But of course, of all these droids, the most important one that we need a reveal for the Return to Tatooine campaign is an all-new C-3PO. Gotta have a new C-3PO. It's been way too long. The TVC 3PO we have is just absolutely terrible. But 3PO aside, I would absolutely love it if Hasbro re-released these other minor droids from this scene. It would just be great for collectors to be able to get their hands on it because these can be hard to come by. So now I want to go into the aliens that sell these droids, and that of course is the Jawas. You cannot tell the story of Tatooine without including Jawas. They are everywhere on that planet. And I brought out a few I have loose, and you can see they're very different. Hasbro has put out a ton of different Jawa action figures, and it seems like most of them are all different. This one, for example, came in that Red Legacy collection with the security droid, and you can see they used plastic for the upper half of the figure, but then soft goods for the lower. And I gotta say, I don't really mind this. I think it works fairly well, but you know, it just has that inconsistent look is the only issue. Then there's the Blue Legacy Collection Jawa that came with the WED Treadwell droid, and this guy's just a hot mess. I mean, he's got that blaster there with the strap that is also connected to his droid controller unit thing, and maybe that's screen accurate, I don't remember, but it just doesn't seem to work. It's like overly complicated. So just not sure I like this one that much because of all that's going on. All plastic goods on this one. And then next, I've got the Tika figure from TVC. This is from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. And she has a nice blaster, and she comes with this nice little accessory thingamajig there. And she has all cloth goods for her robes. And I like it. It looks pretty good, but maybe just a little bit too puffy looking, which tends to happen with all cloth goods. And this is the TVC version, which was actually originally released in the Black Series 3.75. And it works pretty good. This is all plastic goods, but it's got a nice little pattern to it. The sculpt is good, so it looks pretty natural. And so I think that might be the way to go, but I can't really decide. I kind of like my soft goods on Jawas, but I don't want them to look too puffy either. So I can't really decide what I want with my new Jawas, but what I'm trying to get at with all of this is that we need a 4-pack of all new Jawas for Return to Tatooine. You can't build out the Tatooine world and tell the Tatooine story without Jawas, and I think it's time for new Jawas. Just let me know in the comments if you prefer soft goods or plastic for your Jawas. Here's another group of Tatooine figures we've got in the past. This is Garandan, one of my favorite Tatooine aliens, and we definitely need a new Garandan. This is the Obi-Wan from Legacy Collection. You can see he had a great head sculpt, but the worst thing about this figure is they had him doing a force gesture with his right hand, so he cannot hold a lightsaber at all in his right hand, which is his dominant hand. So it just kind of ruined this figure for me. The articulation could be better as well, so definitely looking forward to an all-new Ben Kenobi pipeline by Hasbro. Next is Luke. Now, of course, we're getting a new Farm Boy Luke, and I love this Saga Collection Luke. I love the hat and the poncho, and I brought him out just to make the point that since they're making an all-new Farm Boy Luke, You know, another release they could give us is one like this, with this version, with the poncho and his binocs. I'm just showing here that he's got the farm boy tunic underneath there. But yeah, this is an awesome release back in the day, so I would love to have an updated version of this Luke, maybe with an alt image of him from the deleted scene. And by the way, he came with this awesome case. You know, it's Ben Kenobi's case with the lightsabers. It's got the training ball in there. That was just such a cool accessory back in the day, so I would love to see them do, you know, something like that again. Then, of course, there's the TVC Power Droid. We saw this guy on the Sandcrawler and in the Lars Homestead as well. Great little figure. I think we got it covered here. We probably do not need a Power Droid. And then lastly, I grabbed R3-T2. You can see this guy rolling around the middle of Mos Eisley in A New Hope. Not a great figure. It's from that Saga collection, so I actually would like to see an updated version of him. Next up, just like the Jawas, you cannot tell a proper Tatooine story without including Tusken Raiders. And this is from the Book of Boba Fett 4-pack of Tusken Raiders, but I've left out the Chieftain since he was specifically for that show. But these are great Tuskens. This is the TVC one here. That one was not so great. It had a few issues. It was VC 199. I'm sure they've reused quite a bit of them for the newer ones, but they fixed all the issues. And these are great. I highly recommend getting your hands on a 4-pack of Tusken Raiders. You will not be disappointed, and you can use them in all eras of Star Wars on Tatooine. So I think we're in good shape as far as Tuskens go. However, Hasbro needs to reissue more stock to make sure everyone can get their hands on these. Okay, so that pretty much covers my thoughts on A New Hope figures for the Return to Tatooine line. And I do want to quickly touch on some of the other media, starting with Return of the Jedi. Now, we obviously have gotten plenty for Return of the Jedi, especially last year for the anniversary year. And we've got plenty of Tatooine figures from Return of the Jedi as well. Of course, the barge had quite a bit to do with that. And then we had the Boba Fett or Book of Boba Fett throne room, which could easily be used for Return of the Jedi. Of course, we're also getting the new Jabba the Hutt playset that includes Salacious Crumb and 8D8. So looking forward to that set. So really, we've gotten plenty for Return of the Jedi so far. I love this Boba Fett. I don't think it gets enough hype. I thought they did a fantastic job on this figure. Now, I will say we definitely need an all-new Slave Leia and an all-new Oola, but I think we all know that's just not in the cards. I don't think that will ever happen. But other than those, I'd say Hasbro has done enough for Return of the Jedi Tatooine figures for now and should focus on some of the other media for Tatooine. That being said, one thing I would like to see Hasbro do is to re-release the Gamorrean Guard once again, because they're just so in high demand. They go so well in Tatooine sets, especially with that new Jabba set coming out. I personally only have this one Gam Guard carded, and I need more. I need more to go with my throne room. Please, Hasbro, re-release them. They're too expensive on the secondary market. Maybe even do an Army Builder 4-pack of Gam Guards. That would be great. Okay, next I want to jump over to Book of Boba Fett / Mandalorian, because Tatooine was so prominently featured on those shows, especially Book of Boba Fett. And we have had some great figures from that show. I love these figures. The Cad Bane, of course the Boba Fett, the Black Chrysanthemum, and I think a really sneaky good one was this Tatooine Desert Sands Boba Fett, whatever he was called. He was fantastic. I love the accessories that came with him. Under the Soft Goods was a great figure, and I just couldn't have been more pleased with this one. So we've had just some fantastic Book of Boba Fett figures, but we're still falling a bit short. I can still think of a few areas we could add to that storyline on Tatooine. Of course, we already know we are eventually getting a Cobb Vanth. He has been pipelined, but it's the Boba Fett armor version of Cobb Vanth, which is great, but Hasbro needs to make sure they also release us the non-armored version of Cobb Vanth, since he's the one that is facing down Cad Bane, and we've already got that Cad Bane figure, so we definitely need both versions of Cobb. We also need Peli Motto. She's featured in The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. She's a pretty prominent character on Tatooine for those shows. They've already given us R5-D4. We got the N1 Starfighter, so we definitely need the mechanic. In my previous videos, I've talked about how I'm pretty sure we're going to get Hammerhead in the Vintage Collection, and with that, I think they need to give us the Mayor Mok Shaiz from Book of Boba Fett. That would be really cool. I'd also love to see a Garza Fwip, a Pike Boss, and the Gamorrean guards from Book of Boba Fett. You know, they're the more slender ones than we're used to seeing with Jawa. And lastly, I'd love to see the Rancor Keeper played by Danny Trejo, because come on, who wouldn't want a Danny Trejo action figure for Star Wars? I don't think Hasbro is probably going to make any of these smaller characters for Book of Boba Fett, but these are just some characters I would still love to see to help, you know, complete the scenes for that show. And finally, I want to quickly jump over to episodes 1 and 2, which do feature Tatooine, especially episode 1. Unfortunately, I don't really have any episode 1 characters loose to show you other than this Rum Slag, but I just want to go through a couple notable ones we have from Tatooine and TVC, including Aura Singh, Mo Honick, Rats Tyrell, and Ben Quadraneros. And I brought up those pod racers because I would love to see Hasbro complete all the pod racers in the Vintage Collection line. I know they've put out plenty of pod racers in the previous lines, but I would love to see racers such as Anakin Racer, of course, Sebulba. I like to see them do a complete run of all the pod racers in the Vintage Collection, each having their own card back. You can do them in 2s and put them in those 2 packs if you want. You can even repack some of the ones like from the Legacy Collection, for example, that aren't too bad. I wouldn't mind that. I just want to have them all together in the Vintage Collection. Don't just give us 3 pod racers. I want the whole set. Maybe the most important Tatooine character from the prequels we haven't gotten yet in the Vintage Collection is Watto, so we definitely need Watto. You could do 2 versions of him, the Phantom Menace, and then do a repaint for the Attack of the Clones version where he's a bit older and he has that silly hat. I think Watto would be a great choice for the Return to Tatooine campaign. And if Hasbro finally gives us that all-new C-3PO for A New Hope, they could simply repaint him for the Attack of the Clones version. I think that would be a great addition as well. Alright, so that's going to do it for this episode of Brett on Fett. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see Hasbro reveal for this Return to Tatooine campaign. Thanks for checking out this video. Thank you to my subscribers. Don't forget you can also follow me on Instagram. Take care, and we'll see you next time.